Good morning, students. Welcome back to the lab safety course. In today's lecture, we will discuss about introduction to different labels and signs. This is very basic and very important lecture. And in this lecture, we will cover different types of labels. And there are also different signs. Those are used in the labeling of different products, the lab products, for example, the chemicals, the containers, etc. So what is actually the labels? So label is a small piece of paper you can see or maybe it's made up of plastic film or metal or any other material that is pasted or affixed on the product. So you can see here. So this is called a label because it contains basic information as well as you can see like the symbols of the particular product. Okay, so this is called label. So here you can see this is the complete label. It contains a lot of information about the product name, and the sign, and there are many other signs. So we will just have a look on this label about the important information. We will not go thoroughly into the whole label because it's contain a lot of information. So this label must contain the basic information. So what is the basic information? It should be like the name of the chemical and the warning signs, as well as the name and address of the manufacturers. So this is the basic information that each container or the product must contain this information. And if we go into a little detail, so there is a advanced information on the label. You can see here one, two, I think 14 different types of information on each label you can find. So 1 to 14. But of course, all of this information is very important, but we cannot read while we are going to use any chemical or the container. So the most important information should be like the manufacturer's full information, because for example, if any chemical is we ordered, we check the which is the manufacturers, because sometimes you know the generic and multinational or some other companies are the manufacturers. So this is very important information. And secondly, of course, the handling of the project. So this is very important. Instead of go into detail on the internet or MSD documents, so from the label we can understand the handling of the storage of this container or the chemical or whatever the product. And of course physical and health hazards. So definitely first we read this one, and then accordingly we deal that container or the product in during the handling. And of course it also very important to know the precaution measures as well as the first aid in instructions. As I mentioned, there are many more, tell 14 different types of informations are available on this small piece of paper. So that is called the label. Okay, but most important information that we immediately, within 1 or 2 minutes, we need to scan whenever we receive this product into the lab. So we just go through these 4 or 5 main components, but in future if we need in detail information, so then of course we go on these 14 steps, whatever the required the steps. Okay, so we can get the information. And even if we need more information, so in the coming slides I will explain there is another document that is inside the product that come alongside the product. For example, if it's a box, it's inside material data sheet. So definitely, as I mentioned in the you see on the label there is also sign of hazards is mentioned, and sometimes there is a this pictogram as well as the mention the different terminologies. For example, if on the sticker or the product is mentioned this product is has carcinogenic properties, only this word may be mentioned, carcinogenic. So you should understand this is a this product can cause a cancer in living even in living tissues. For example, if we use extensive amount or the exposure is a high, or like in prolonged exposure, so it can cause carcinogenic. Of course, they mention about this toxicity also. And some products, maybe it's mentioned sensitizers, so they have sensitizer activities, which means that they can cause allergic reactions. And of course there are many products those are dangerous, or they can damage the liver, so they mention hepatotoxin. So hepatotoxicity, maybe it's also mentioned on the product or like on the label. And some products also damage the kidney, and it's mentioned and sometime it's mentioned like a full detail, like a full line, like this definition, like what they cause. But sometimes they mention like only this terminology, nephrotoxin activity, like these. Okay. And of course a neurotoxin, so it's, if it's mentioned neurotoxin, and you should uh, understand the concept. So neurotoxin are those chemicals those can cause damage to the liver tissues due to the neuron, right? So neurotoxin, so toxin is poison, and neuron so neuro from the neuron. And similarly nephron is from nephrology, you see like the doctors, nephrologist, so those are kidney specialists. And similarly like other these terminologies are medical. Okay. So they also mention this kind of pictograms as well as this kind of signs. So this is really helpful when we see what kind of causes these chemical hazards or chemical these chemical containers contains on the mention on the label. And moreover there are the precautionary measures. So this is a very important whenever we received any chemical or any container or any box. So precaution measures are very important to read. For example, they mentioned do not breathe. Of course it means like we definitely first wear the gloves, the mask, right? Use an well ventilated areas, so it means you cannot like open it into the very narrow or like a very small store like these. Okay, so whenever we need so we need to open a well ventilated area, so that the vapors cannot we cannot breathe them. So keep container always in the closed condition and never open it, so that there is a no like leakage, or like the vapors cannot go outside and spread into the air. And of course avoid skin contact. So then definitely, so it means like this chemical, if it's mentioned avoid contact with skin, so it means it can absorb through the skin. Okay, so if you remember, so off and on we will cover like different types of the terminologies, that how these chemical can enter into the body of the worker or the students, whatever. Okay, so it means it has the property that can even if it's touched to your skin, so it can the absorb by the skin. Of course, once you finish the handling, wash hands thoroughly with the soap and any detergents. And of course, keep away from the sparks. So it means it's have a certain temperature that can ignite. So once we are going to use this chemical close to the heat, or like the flame or whatever. Do not store near combustible materials, as I mentioned. Of course, some other chemicals, they also can make reaction with certain chemicals. So they can combine and then they make like combustible reaction. And then of course, it is very dangerous to avoid like, the during the storage. So there is no like other chemical that has the combustible properties. So you can store along with this certain chemical if it's mentioned these properties. Remove and wash contaminated cloths the promptly, of course. So if you're like a lab coat, or like any cloth is contaminated, of course this is really important to remove immediately and wash. Here there are different colors and number coding systems also used in certain chemicals. So for example, these are four numbers. So red, yellow, blue, white. So these colors present kind of a hazard. So this is very important if we have the information about this color coding the system. So for example, if there is a color code like a red, so it means it's express fire. So it's mean like these are the the explosion can cause like these chemicals. And if there is a yellow color, so this is not stable, instability or reactivity. So these chemicals are unstable. So it means like they are more sensitive. If the color code is blue, so it means it's a health hazard. So it will mention like what particular the health hazard. And white, of course, a specific hazard and personal protection. So in white color coding, they mention like what is the personal protective equipment for this particular chemical, and specific hazard. So specific hazard, if they mention, so that's more easier you can avoid or while you are using. So because it's very specific. So here you can see these color code system 1 to 4, red, yellow, blue, and of course white. And here you can see the degree of hazards according to the numbers. So there is a maximum is a 4 degree 0 to 4. So sometimes these numbers are mentioned. You can see 0 to 3 like these. So if there is a 0, so it means it has like a minimum degree of hazards. And of course, if it's a 2, it's moderate, 1 is a slight, and of course, if there is a 3, so it means like number 3 is a serious degree of hazards of this chemical, whatever the chemical. And of course, if it's mentioned number 4, so it means it's more severe, like the top one. So this is more sensitive. So this is very important uh, to work or handle certain chemicals. Those have like number 3, 4, the degree of hazards numbers. So let's here you can see here, for example, the yellow. So it has a mostly like the reactivity of yellow diamond. You can see here it means it's also from 0 to 4. All are 0 to 4, of course, because these are the degrees of hazards. So here you can see like in the yellow will not harm one above like 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, as the degree of severity is increasing, you can see like the temperature is decreasing. For example, here is the red diamond in like a fire hazard. You can see if it's a uh, for severe hazard, so the temperature will be like below than 73 Fahrenheit. So if the chemicals, those flashpoint temperature 73 Fahrenheit, so it means it's more dangerous. If the temperature rise 75, so it can cause explosion, right? And similarly, 100, below 100 is number 3, and above 100. So before the numbers is going down, the temperature is increasing. And similarly, if we talk about the blue diamond, so if any chemical that has like this diamond property, so at 4 is deadly and 3 is extremely dangerous, of course, like these. Okay, so you can see like how the severity of that particular chemical or is increased with these numbers, and the sign mentioned like you should be like very careful. And if you talk about the white diamond, so here sometime this is mentioned specific, might be sometime it's showing like this color, this sign W, then it's deleted W. It's mean use no water. So if you are using that particular chemical where that sign is mentioned, so it means don't add water, okay, otherwise it will react with that chemical. And of course, if you can see like these fan symbol, so it's a radioactive, so it means it has radioactivity. Okay, so this is very dangerous. And of course, if it's mentioned oxy, cor, alk, acid, so these are acid, alkali, corrosive, and oxidizer properties. These are the specific and particular properties. Okay, so if they mention, then of course we are very easy, we can understand like these particular properties. I hope you understand. I think this is not very difficult. Okay, so you need to of course you need to remember this one, and of course a few of these properties also. And here, so this is the classification of NFPA rating explanation. So it's almost the same like we mentioned previously, but it's using like, for example, a different health hazards, flammability of hazards, and then of course instability hazard and special hazards. So it's almost same, but it's using like a certain like a different chemicals. Okay, so can be lethal, can cause serious disease like these. Okay, so this is just for your information. So you don't need to memorize all these the information from this slide. But of course you go through like for your understanding, this is complementary slide from the previous slides. Okay, how like in this yellow hazards, and how like a red one and the blue one look like as in the previous slides I mentioned. And of course there are certain signs, and of course as I mentioned there are of course signal words, as well as the signs are also used on the labels. So for example, this is the pictogram or the sign, or the, and also this is the word they use like these. So warning sign, and sometime like together like warning plus this pictogram, caution, warning, like these kind of. So what does mean these signs or these pictograms? If there is a caution, so mean can cause potentially moderate injury. So it means it's not very severe chemical. So but it has the potential to cause any injury. So if there is a warning sign, can cause potentially serious injury or death. Okay. So it means this is a warning sign, shows so it can cause potential serious injury. So so if there is a warning sign on certain chemical, so it means we should be like more careful than compared to the chemical those have like only caution. And if there is a danger sign, so it means it can cause immediate serious injury even if we expose like very minor concentration or the amount of of the chemical. Okay, so if there is a danger sign, so it means like this chemical is very serious danger, the serious one, so we should be careful. And also there are different signs. For example, toxic, so it means like a poison, it's a poisonous chemical that will cause you to become sick or the sill. And a low exposure can also damage have certain effects on your body parts. It could affect your whole body or like particular target organs. So in the last slides I think we discussed about the kidney or the liver, as well as the neurons. Okay, so it depends like about the chemicals. So some chemicals of course only affect your particular parts, but might be some chemical they have effect on the whole body. And of course also some chemicals they show like this chemical is irritant properties. So this substance can cause inflammation or other discomfort to the body. So once it's react to the skin or the eyes, it can cause like irritation, of course. So it means when we are using this chemical, so we should take care of the glasses. We should to protect our glasses, of course, the mask as well. And of course short-term effect but reversible. So even it's a short-term effect can cause certain irritation into our eyes, but this effect is reversible. So reversible mean like it can be recovered, it's not like very dangerous. Okay, so with a certain period of time, so with a particular washing of your eyes, as well as getting some medicine, okay, visiting the doctor, so it can cause reversible reaction. So it's not like irreversible reaction. So it's very easy to just finish the irritation. And of course most of the chemicals have corrosive properties. So these corrosive chemicals they can damage by chemical action. So usually they are strong acids or base. So these are the acidic or like the basic properties of these chemicals. They are more stronger than the irritant. Okay, so their of course effect is irreversible. Okay, if we have some contact with these chemicals without using PP, or like we are not taken serious while using these chemicals, and if something happen, so so we should be very careful. Okay, and of course if there is acid or base in particular pictogram or these sign also display on certain chemicals. So some chemicals is mentioned, this chemical has like a flash point temperature or like auto ignition temperatures. So what does mean flash point temperature or flash point? So flash point is the minimum temperature at which a liquid gives off vapors in a sufficient in a sufficient concentration that it can ignite, it can catch fire in the presence of ignition source. So ignition sources mean like any flame or spark or match, the flame or gas flame, whatever. Okay, if there is any ignition so close to this chemical, it can cause it can catch fire. And some chemicals, if it's mentioned auto ignition temperature, so it means these chemical can cause spontaneously ignite, can catch fire in a normal temperature, so they don't need like any ignition source, for example like a flame or a spark. Okay, so they can catch fire, or they can ignite automatically, like without any the particular temperatures. Okay, even at some normal temperature, which means these are more sensitive, the auto ignition temperatures, so their handling is more the sensitive while compared to these flashpoint the chemicals, because they have certain temperature range, as well as the other condition is ignition sources. So it means the difference between the properties of both chemicals. And then come combustible as well as flammables. So combustible and then flammables. So here, if you have a look on this diagram on your right side, so these are the flammable and the upper one is combustible, and this is the thermometer showing like different temperatures, and here you can see there are different classes of liquids, and this is the thermometer showing a different range of temperatures. So here you can see the flammables are those chemicals, those can catch fire and burn easily at normal working temperatures. Particularly, they have flash point temperature is less than 100. So you can see this is the 100 temperature, and they can catch fire like even less than 100. And in flammable liquids, class 1C, class 1B, and class 1A. So these liquids fall under flammables. And the chemicals or the liquid chemicals, so this is particularly for the liquids chemicals. So those cannot ignite, or they need like a temperature higher than 100 Fahrenheit. So they fall, or they call like combustibles. And here you can see like class 2, class 3A, and class 3B, so they fall under combustible. Okay, so if the chemicals or the liquid chemicals, they can catch fire and their flash point temperature is more than 100, so we call them combustible liquids or combustibles. If the only condition is the temperature, if the temperature is less than 100 to catch the fire, those will become flammable liquids. I hope it's very clear, very easy. And of course, then and other category is explosive, and you can see like this sign of explosive on the labels. So these substances can they contain some amount of energy, potential energy, that can produce explosion. Whenever explosion is happen, so it release like it's a sudden released. Okay, and it's produce a lot of heat, light and sound and pressure. So that's called explosion. So some substances also they also have like a kind of these properties. So always it's a mention like this pictogram, as well as like this chemical has explosive properties. Of course, we should be more careful about the handling of these chemicals. Material Safety Data Sheet, MSD. This is very important and very informative document. And before we were talking about like labels and signs, so that was actually like on the outside of the chemical or the box or whatever the packaging, right? So this is the document that called MSDS. It is a one document that contain in detail information, not like the label. So this document contain whole thorough information about the physical, chemical properties, storage, whatever. It's have everything, every information. So this document usually come like in 2 or 3 languages. For example, it's bilingual, or sometime like separate in English. If it's a if like for example we are like our language like national language is Arabic, so then any product that come into Oman, UAE, Saudi Arabia, so one definitely language document will be in Arabic, and the second one in English. Okay, and if there are countries like French, so one, then it will be like in one French and one English. So usually like one English and the second one according to that the national language of that country. And similarly, if I think for example, if you are going to buy a car, and then of course they have like their manual, and of course if you buy like a phone, and you can open the box and you can see like there's one a manual, so that's actually like similarly like a MSDS that contain whole information. So particularly for chemicals we use like a material safety data sheet. Okay, so this document contain all physical chemical properties of that particular chemical and its health and safety measures, handling and working, and of course storage properties, storage, disposal, and what are the necessary PP, because on the label we can just read the label and get like immediate like the basic information, or like a little bit the advanced, but not like as that much like as MSDS. And melting point, temperature, flame, health hazards, and many more detailed information is available. So whenever you are going to use any particular chemical, so this is really very important to read this document using that product. Of course, there is information available on the label, that is information, basic information, and if you have thorough knowledge, then you can of course might be you are expert, but as a learner or the beginner, so you just read this document first while using any chemical. It also has, as I mentioned, it will in detail mention if you inhale particular like chemicals, it can go through your definitely respiratory tracts through the lungs, and while inhalation, it can goes to into your lungs, and then of course it can sediment or can cause the disease, lungs diseases. And if that particular chemical is enter through the digestion, so it means if you are eating something and you did not wash, or like your hands, or like your hands were contaminated, or any other sources, so of course then of course by eating it can goes to your stomach. Okay, so these information also mentioned into MSDS documents. And it will also mention if it's this chemical can go like through absorption or through the skin or eyes, and of course if chemical spill out or leak onto your body parts, of course then of course it says absorb like quickly. And injection of toxic substances through the skin is also mentioned, so it means definitely you will not take injection, but there are some time if your finger or your the hands are sharp cutted, and then while even you wear the gloves and you are working, so there are chances it can inject into your body. And this is very important, this is substance. So sometimes some substances like for example two chemical, if we use together, so they become like they have very strong effect, we call it a synergistic effect. So what is the synergistic effect? The combination of two chemicals to make like more stronger. For example, I just showing you like this picture, but it's more. So like for example some alcohols and chlorinated solvents, so once they mix together, so their exposure is higher than compared to the individual chemicals. Okay, so you understand what is the synergistic effect? The combination or the mixing of two chemicals, and they have the effect, stronger effect than the individual, is called synergistic effect. So this information is very important to read through through MSD document, MSDS, right? Because if sometimes they mention as this chemical has synergistic effect, for example this chlorinated solvents or particular solvents with alcohol like these, so then in this way we can avoid, we cannot mix that or we cannot use that chemical with the pointed chemicals. Similarly, it is also mentioned in detail about the emergency first aid procedures, as well as if there is any accidental release of this chemical happen, what to do if substance spills or leak. Okay, because of course this is the part of life while we are working in the lab, and how to dispose of those chemical if it's a spillage happen, and how about the equipment procedures to cleaning it. Of course, not only we are talking about the human health, but of course in the lab we are working on different equipments, and if that particular chemical or substances are spilled out or leakage happen, and then of course it means it's contaminated to the equipments, and of course if we did not clean or take care of that particular equipment, then of course everybody who's working, they will get infected. All this information is mentioned into this document, as well as in a strong the handling and storage, or like how to handle and store this substance. Other precautions like grounding containers during a transfer of flammables, because sometimes even too much the moving of the chemicals can also cause a danger, so they will mention. So if there are containers are bigger, so all this information is available in MSDS documents. It also contain this is the last slide, and it also mention about the toxicological information. So this is really very important information, mostly like used in animal human sciences. This about like the toxicity, highly toxic, indicated by like this pictogram sign you can see mostly on some. So this is the toxicology, the information is mentioned, might be like it has a LC50 dose, or like a concentration. So LD50 dose and LC50 concentration, and sometimes they mention. So they mention this chemical contain LC50 concentration. They will, in bracket, they will mention number. So what is this LC50? So this is whenever the companies, they produce or they make or they discover any component, or they make the chemical or substances. So first they test the toxicology of this chemical, the toxicity. And for example, how they test it, they use of course like a model host. For example, if certain companies, they produce drugs for the humans, so of course they will not like use the human for the testing. So they will use the model that have the same system. For example, the mice. So the mice has the same system as the human. So any dose, like any drug, first the companies produce, so they test on the mice, and then of course they design, or they plan the doses. So LC50 is the lethal concentration. LC, lethal concentration required to kill 50% of the population in a given period of time, when the concentration was 1 milligram per liter. So if the concentration is provided 1 milligram per liter into a particular period of time, and it will kill 50% of the population, whatever, if it's a mice, or if it's a plants, or something is different, right? So if, for example, here is mice, right? So if this concentration into this period, so it is called LC50. And if the lethal dose, LD is a lethal dose at which 50% of population is killed in a given period of time, milligram per day. Okay, so here actually in MSD documents will be mentioned like which is this amount, okay, about that chemical, 5 milligram, 10 milligram, like this. Okay, so this is very important. So this will affect us or reflect the dose or the exposure that we should avoid. So this is really the very basic as well as very important information. And this lecture was very basic, and I think you whole have idea about what is the label, and what are the signs, why they are using, and what is the quick information you can get from the label. And then of course, if you need the information in detail, so you should go to the MSDS document. Just open the chemical box or whatever, and then you can find like each new chemical, so they also contain MSD documents. So this is very important, and always remember, if you are going to use uh, very important chemical very first day, so you should read this MSD documents first, and then try that chemical. So I hope you understand our lecture. So if you have any questions, so on Thursday inshallah, so I will be online, so we will discuss if you have any questions. So thank you so much, have a great day. So see you next time. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.